In regards to Noach's age, we seem to find a little bit of a problem with the years that are mentioned in the Torah. That is, that the Torah says that the Noach ben Sheish Meis Shana v'Hamabul Hoyamayim al Haaretz, Noach 600 years when the Mabul starts. The Torah tells us when the water dries up, Vahiba Achaz v'Sheish Meis Shana, it's 601 years. So Noach technically should be 601 years old now. The Torah tells us that Noach lives 350 years after the Mabul, so technically he should be 951 years when he passes away. And yet the Torah says he was 950 years old. So the Medrash explains this, that the 1 year of the Mabul is just not counted as part of Noach's life. As the Mefarshim explained, this was a year of trouble, a year of anguish, it's not counted. The question, however, is why Rashi doesn't deal with this issue. There seems to be an open problem in the calculations of the Psukim. So the Rebbe starts off first with the following explanation and says, when the Torah says, B'shnas sheish me'ez shana l'chayei Noach, it doesn't necessarily mean that Noach is 600 years old already. It could very well mean Noach is 599 and a bit. That means he's starting off, he's in his 600th year. And therefore, when the pasuk says, Ba'achaz v'sheish me'ez shana charvu hamayim, again, it could be, it's a bit over 600 years, and Noach is now in his 601st year. And therefore, if we have 599 and a bit before the Mabul, another year the Mabul, so now Noach is 600 and a bit, plus 350 is 950. However, the Rebbe says, to say that Noach is 959 and 599 would pose the following problem, seemingly. Because Rashi, when he calculates, and when he tells us when the Mabul started, he says it was 7 days after Mesushelach passes away. And Rashi makes the following statement, that Mesushelach's years, if you figure it out, finish in the 600th year of Noach. How does this calculation work? Rashi doesn't say the calculation, but the calculation is, Mesushelach is 187 years old when he gives birth to Lemech, who's the father of Noach. Lemech is 182 when he gives birth to Noach. So together, that's 369, meaning Mesushelach would be 369 when Noach is born. The Torah tells us Mesushelach lives 969 years. So if Mesushelach is 369 when Noach is born, when he's 969, Noach is 600. So that's perfect, if Noach is in fact 600. But if the way we explained, Noach is only 599, so then it seems to be that we're missing a year over here in Mesushelach's life. So the Rebbe says, we could explain this in the following way. When Torah says that someone gave birth at a particular age, it doesn't mean exactly on his birthday, the day he turned that age. So for example, Mesushelach gives birth when he's 187, doesn't mean the day he turns 187. Because then we would say, Lemech gives birth, so Lemech is born when on Mesushelach's birthday. Lemech gives birth on his own birthday, and then it would be that all the generations that the Torah is enumerating all the way from Adam Rishon are all being born on the same day, on Rosh Hashanah when Adam Rishon is created, which seems to be a bit of a strange thing which you don't find anywhere. Rather, it means that when we say a person is a certain age, it means that age plus whatever it is, plus a bit. So 187, if Mesushelach is when he gives birth to Lemech, it means 187 and a bit. Lemech is 182 and some when he gives birth to Noach. So all of this is adding up. Plus Noach is 599 and a bit. All of this could add up to that year, which we were missing seemingly in that year of Mesushelach's life. But the Rebbe says it still seems to be a problem. If we want to add these remainders of years, it's going to cause a problem somewhere else. Rashi tells us that the Mabul was in the year Elef Tov Reish Nun Vav, 1666 is when the Mabul took place. What's the calculation? When we look at all the years that are counted in the Torah, when Adam gives birth to Shes, Shes gives birth to Enosh, all of these generations until Noach, so it will work out to be exactly 1,666 years. But if we just said that every time someone gives birth, the Torah mentions a date, a year, it's always going to be plus some, then all of these generations together, all of the remainders of these years should have added up to at least another year, if not more. So then, when Rashi says it's 1,666, it should have been a little bit more years than that, at least another year. So, the Rebbe starts off with one suggestion which the Rebbe rejects, that the Rebbe says he can't say that Rashi's going by that suggestion, that perhaps when the Torah says these years, it doesn't mean each individual's full years by himself, but rather we're going according to the calendar years of the world. But the Rebbe rejects this, says that Rashi, we can't say that Rashi just automatically relying on that we should automatically know this. And instead, the Rebbe gives the following explanation to clarify what's going on over here, both with Noach's years and the 1,666 years, etc. The Rebbe says, but Pashtus, when the Torah says that someone was a certain age, it doesn't mean an exact number. Rather, it means an approximate number. In other words, it could be a little bit less, a few months less, it could be a few months more. In other words, up to half a year, even less or more. And therefore, the Rebbe says, this will, the way I understand what the Rebbe is saying is, when we speak about Noach, when we said that he is 600 years old, or it was 599 and 600th year, but again, it could be 599 and a half. When we said that's 350 years after the Mabul, again, it doesn't have to be necessarily full 350 years. It could be less by a half a year. And the half in the beginning and the half afterwards, that could make up for the year that we were missing, that year of the Mabul that we were concerned about. And this also helps us with this calculation of the 1,666 years. Because just like we understand that there were some generations that gave birth with some extra months after the particular age that's mentioned, but there could also be a few months less. So between the two, if you say someone gave birth at a particular age, it could be a few months more, a few months less. So we asked before, how does it fit? There has to be all of these remainders adding, but it's not always adding. Sometimes it's subtracting, and between the two of them, the years equal out and they average out. The Rebbe now turns to sort of another explanation, although the Rebbe says it's not so much al derech hapshat. But first the Rebbe introduces and says, simply the reason the Torah B'chalal speaks about dates, when people gave birth, the years when people gave birth, why is it even relevant? So it's really in order for us to understand the timeline of when everything in the Torah is happening. It's not so much for the particular person giving birth to a certain person, how old he was, that's not so relevant. It's more to understand the calendar of the Torah. And therefore, when the Torah is telling us a particular person's year, it's not necessarily going an exact age of that person, but rather the Rebbe says it could be a difference of almost 2 years in regarding that particular number. So, for example, if the Torah says that Chelek gives birth at 187, really it could be 186 and some, or it could be 187 and some, because really what the Torah is concerned about is just giving us the calendar year from creation where this is happening. So if we say, for example, Adam Rishon gives birth at 130, and then Sheis gives birth at whatever age, and then Lemech, etc., and Adam, Sheis, Enosh, etc., etc. What we're trying to say is that in the calendar years, this is how many years passed. But in the individual, not necessarily he is exactly that age. He could be a half a year, 3/4 of a year, younger, older, etc. Why is it so relevant to know the age of the world? In other words, we're saying now it's not even so relevant anymore, the particular person's age. The Torah is more concerned in us knowing really where it's happening in the history of the world. So the Rebbe says we have a medrash, where the medrash speaks about a certain goy, Akilas, that wanted to become a geir, and when he spoke about the mile of Yiddishkeit, he says that even the smallest one of the Yidden know how many years passed since the creation of the world. Obviously, this is, in other words, this idea of knowing the age of the world is something very, very much to do with Yiddishkeit, the mile of Yiddishkeit. Why is that? Says the Rebbe, the Amunah in Chidush HaOlam is one of the fundamental inyanim of the Torah that the Eibishter created the world, that the world wasn't always around. The Ramban says this is one of the most biggest principles in the Torah. But the Rebbe says a person could have a munah, and yet it's not necessarily with the same crystal clear, absolute way as, in other words, in a munah itself, you could have different levels. Someone has a munah, and yet you could have someone that has it in a much, much clearer and sharper way. Says the Rebbe, this is the pshat, that the Torah comes along and tells us the exact years of what everything happened. So when a person comes along and he speaks about the fact that the Eibishter created the world and that the world starts at a certain point, it should be in a much more precise and exact way to understand what exactly happened when. In this way, the emunah of the Yid in Brias HaOlam could also be with a much, much greater clarity.